Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet Live on ETV Live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1, also live on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. My name is Samuel Ishen and you are welcome to the conversation. So I'm sure you've heard the talks about the IMF and that $3 billion we had been waiting for, and the fact that some 600 million has been disbursed and it has hit the account of the Bank of Ghana. How is that going to change the story of Ghana's economy when it comes to the expectations of the business community with this money which has hit our account? What is it going to be used for? We've been told that it's going to be used for the stabilization of the economy. What expectations does the business community expect of the administration? Remember, just yesterday, the Monetary Policy Committee stayed the monetary policy rate at 29.5%. Many were hoping that it would come down to allow for businesses to access loans at cheaper rates, but that did not happen. We're hoping that this will stabilize the cedi as well for us when it comes to how it's trading against other forex, especially the dollars that businessmen trade in. All these and more are on our minds, even as we discuss the issue of the IMF and several other issues. I encourage you to stay with us as I introduce my guest to you in a brief moment. But for now, we'll go for a short breather. When we come back, you'd get to know who I'm speaking to tonight on the show. Do kindly stay with us. Be right back. And welcome back to Fact Sheet Live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1 in Bogatanga and Tamale, also live on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. My name once again is Samuel Ishen and you're welcome to the conversation tonight. My guest is Mr. Mark Bedu Abwaji. He is the Chief Executive Officer for the Ghana International Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we're talking about their hopes, their outlooks, their aspirations and their forecasts for the Ghanaian economy, especially after the IMF money hit our account. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And thank you for hosting us in your beautiful office.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I hope you're enjoying the office.
Well, it's a nice place, very cozy, and I like the very serene nature and quiet nature of the place.
You're always welcome to my office.
Thank you, sir. So let me ask about the chamber. There's so much talk about your chamber.
Yes.
What do you do necessarily?
Well, the chamber basically is a business association. And of course, it was set up over 250 years. And the focus at that time was for our colonial masters to facilitate their trade. So whenever they want to gather their products, the chambers around the country will assist them in doing that. But in 1968, Kwame Nkrumah thought it wise that there should be the need for a voice for the business community. Okay. So through an license one of 1968, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry was formed, and the focus changed from just facilitation to promoting and protection of businesses in Ghana. Okay. So basically, we are an advocacy institution ensuring that the right business environment is created. We also, through our activities in trade fairs and trade missions, help businesses to exhibit their products and also get opportunity to sell as well. We receive a number of investors who would want to invest in Ghana, and they need people to talk to form partnership, collaboration, and we create a platform called Business to Business, where when they come, we allow them to meet the business community in Ghana. And we also believe that capacity building is key. It's not just enough to say that I've set up a business. You should be able to manage the business, manage your finances, your human resource, your governance structure. So we provide these support services also to businesses. We believe in evidence-based advocacy. Okay. So we have a very strong research team that before we come out to say anything, we have research into it. We're able to come out with recommendations that will help both the business community and the government. So we set up as an interface between the private sector and government. If you go to any other country, you're likely to see a Chamber of Commerce and Industry in those countries because of the kind of support they provide to the private sector and also to the government as well. So basically, in a nutshell, that is what we do. And we've been doing that all this while through the chamber. We've been able to assist a number of businesses to get collaboration, partnership, and also to grow from wherever they are to a higher level.
So in terms of your strength, give us a sense of your membership.
So we have currently about 8,000 members.
Okay.
in all the sectors in the Ghanaian economy. So we have members in the service sector, agric, and then the industry sector. And we have 8 branches at the moment across the country. So wherever you are, if you're a business entity and you need the kind of support services that we provide, in most of the regional offices, we have branches there. We have Kumasi. For the northern sector, we have the Wa Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We have the Koforidua for the eastern region. For the central region, we have Cape Coast. We have Takoradi Chamber of Commerce. And then we have Takwa purposely for the mining sector. In Accra, even though we have the head office here, we have the Accra branch. And then we have Tema as well. So basically, I mean, very soon will be, because we want to bring our services to the doorstep of every business entity, we'll be going to the various other regions as well.
Who qualifies to be a member of your chamber?
Once you are doing a legal business,
okay,
and you are registered at the Registrar General's department, that is we call it the ABC, it is the basic thing you need to be a member of the chamber. We want to be able to vouch for the credibility of our members because we refer them to international business owners to do business with. So once you are registered, you can join the chamber. There's a process that you have to go through. You just pick a form. Our marketing team will assist you to fill the form, and then you become part of the chamber. The good thing is that there's a regular visit, and also every month we have meetings with our members just for them to let us know the challenges they are going through and what kind of support or help they will need from us. So if you are doing a legal business and you are registered with the Research General Department, you can be a member of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. People, I've heard a lot of people saying that the chamber is for big business and
exactly,
small SMEs cannot be part of the chamber. I think that is not correct. Basically, close to 90% of our members are SMEs. That's what we were set up for, to ensure that we grow the SMEs to become bigger companies. So if you're an SME and you are registered, please, you can join us.
Now, let's zoom into the main conversation, and that has to do with the economy. Now, with this huge membership, what have they been telling you throughout the entire year when the year started, and we all know what businesses were going through? What were they telling you?
The obvious thing is that it's been a very difficult year. For the past 2 years, if you look at the numbers and the macroeconomic environment, you realize that the business environment has been harsh. And of course, if you look at the numbers of the business themselves in terms of their profit, you realize that most of them are not making profit. Few are breaking even. But it's not so easy to say you are closing down your business. People are now adopting a survival strategy to ensure that at least they're able to, so we call it put body and soul together, and to sustain the business until such a time where things will come up. Obviously, the macroeconomic variables, as I said earlier, inflation, for instance, if you look at where we started off, close to 12.2% 2 years ago, to a high level of 54.1% in December 2022. Now we have seen some downward trend in inflation to 41.2 as at the last account. And you know, once inflation goes up, all other macroeconomic variables will follow. And one of the key reasons why the main target for the Bank of Ghana is to ensure that they achieve a lower inflation. So the Bank of Ghana will also adopt policy to bring inflation down. And consistently, we have seen an increase in the policy rate. Now it's about 29.5, the highest since we started this inflation targeting approach, and the highest among a lot of African countries. From as low as 13.5 beginning of last year to 29.5. And there is a positive correlation between the policy rate and the lending rate. So once the policy rate is going up, the lending rate will also follow. Now, if you want to borrow, you can do that at a rate of 40 to 45%. Just your cost of credit is 40 to 45%, excluding all other variables that comes into as a cost of production. So, and the number of taxes, the utility prices also going up from September last year to just this month. Electricity alone has gone up by 75%. Water has gone up. And electricity constitutes about 30% of the cost of production of a normal manufacturing company. So anytime there is just a 1% increase in electricity, you can imagine its impact on the cost of production. And we were in a period of time where, because of the inflation, the purchasing power of consumers also went down significantly. So your cost of production is going up. The people that you expect to buy the product, they are not buying because they don't have the money. So your revenue is curtailed, and your cost of production is also going up. In a simple mathematical form or in accounting form, you realize that your profit will be negative, or it's a loss. It's been difficult anyway. The taxes for me are also so many that we have had cause to complain about the impact of these taxes on the normal businesses. And there's also a lot of competition in the system. Because your cost of production is going up, businesses are not competitive. And Ghana is an open economy. People are bringing in products. So you compare the prices, people will prefer to buy at a lower price because even their purchasing power had gone down. So your products, locally made products, are not being patronized. So the environment has been very difficult for every business. Usually you can have a system where some of the sectors may benefit, but you realize that almost every sector is suffering from this condition that we find ourselves.
You made mention of your members struggling to even break even, but I'm curious about whether some have fallen along the way in terms of even staying in business. Have you had that?
Oh yes, we've had a number of them closing down, a number significantly cutting down production. Quite recently, I was having a discussion with one of our members who is into the construction sector. He started last year with over 125 employees. As at the end of the year, he had only 25 employees. And those were the ones that were supposed to even make sure that all the assets and other things, I think the security people, those who were doing the core work, had been laid off. So a lot of the SMEs had gone down, and some have also relocated, and it's real, relocated to the nearby neighboring countries. Relatively, the environment is quite okay in those countries. It's the main reason why, if you go to the ports now, you realize that the number of containers that are coming in had gone down significantly. They are using the Togo and the Cote d'Ivoire port. So a lot of them have set up warehouses in there, and then they transport the goods there and then bring them as and when they want to. So the revenue that would have even come to Ghana is now being channeled to or sent to the other country, just because we have not managed our taxes and levies very well when it comes to our entry and our exit ports. And I think it's a major concern for all of us.
Have you been satisfied with the approach government has used so far in trying to stabilize things when it comes to the economy? Have you been satisfied with the approach?
Not really. You know, in a typical macroeconomic policy, you have the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. In other jurisdictions, they use that to incentivize the private sector, much as they would want to generate revenue. We have had fiscal and monetary policy that is making it difficult for businesses. If you have a fiscal policy that is overly tilted towards aggressive revenue mobilization, and our system is such that when they say they are mobilizing revenue, they are looking at taxes. So a lot of taxes, and a lot of businesses are already suffering. So when you impose some of these taxes, it makes it difficult for them. Let me tell you one thing. We did a research during the COVID period to understand the factors that impact on profitability on businesses, and realized that most of the SMEs in Ghana are growth-oriented, meaning that given the opportunity, they can grow to become bigger companies. So what we also realized is that up to what we call the gross profit, EBITDA, they were all making profit. When the externalities come in, the taxes, the interest rate and other things, then all of them are making losses. So we should look at that aspect of it very well. So taxes are good, and businesses are not against payment of taxes. But taxes that are inimical and counterproductive are not good for the economy. That is the kind of taxes we are having now. And to generate tax revenue, it's not only about increasing the tax rate or introducing new tax. It's also about compliance and recovery. That is a challenge we have had.
Okay.
If you take our economy, for instance, close to 50 million businesses and individuals are supposed to pay taxes. Only 5 million are paying. The rest are not paying. Those that are easily identifiable, the businesses, myself and yourself, are the ones that we are piling the taxes on day in and day out. And you get to a level when there will be a fatigue. If you take the LAFAC, for instance, it's an economic model, which simply says that when you increase the tax rate to a certain level, the revenue that you expect, you won't get, because people will find a way to avoid the taxes legally. Avoidance is legal.
Yeah.
And we had a critical experience with the e-levy when we all complain about it, that the rate is high. Please reduce it. We are all ready to pay. It didn't listen. In the end, they didn't even get 10 to 20% of the revenue that they wanted. People find a way around it until such a time that they reduce it. So find a balance that will support businesses and also get your revenue.
These beautiful ideas you're sharing with me, these modules that you talk about, I would have thought that in government's decisions, captains of industry like yourselves would be at round tables with them, brainstorming as to how we can all journey together. Are you telling me that these ideas have not been shared with the finance ministry at your brainstorming sessions if you are invited in the first place?
Well, I think that there is lack of stakeholder engagement and consultation in this country when it comes to economic management in general. There are instances where we are asked to submit our input into the budget, which we regularly do. The last one was before the 2023 budget, when we were asked to submit our input, which personally I was there to present the input of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And one of the things I mentioned is that we are not expecting an increase in the existing taxes or introduction of new taxes. I hammered on it. And I used the research that we did to buttress my point. So we were, in a way, not expecting, only for us to get a budget and then we see all these taxes and other things. And of course, we look at even the lead up to this IMF thing, most of the things that were done or have been done by the Ministry of Finance, you realize that consultation was very low and limited. That is why it gets to a point people are always fighting against it. But as we say, we all have something to contribute. If you are bringing a tax that will affect a business, it is important that you get them on board. Probably they'll be able to also come out with a recommendation that will help them, also help you to get your revenue. I think it's something that we need to do as a country, to consult largely those who will be affected by some of these policies.
It's obvious fiscal consolidation and then also mopping up and ensuring that government's expenditure is limited is the path we are on, with the IMF coming on board. And all these conditions that we will be talking about very soon are also there for us to think about. As businesses, seeing that this is the path or the tangent government is on, mobilizing, controlling expenditure, and then ensuring that things stabilize, the outlook doesn't look positive for you as businessmen.
Yes, of course. The fiscal consolidation has two sides, as we said, expenditure rationalization and the revenue mobilization. If you look at the IMF document, it's highly weighted on the revenue mobilization. Even though there are bits and pieces of the expenditure rationalization, we were also expecting that there should be a fair balance between the two. As I said earlier, if you want to mobilize revenue, much of it is coming from businesses, so definitely there will be taxes. If you look at point 24, it clearly states the kind of fiscal policies and tax measures they are going to institute, and it's not in the interest of business. In fact, some of them, as per condition, have already been done. You know, the 3 taxes that were introduced. They were something that we have to achieve before we get to the IMF, and more are also going to come. If you look at item number 34, it's talking about monetary policy and exchange rate. They are proposing tightening of the monetary policy, which is also not in the interest of businesses. So the rationalization of expenditure, for me, everybody should be able to tighten the belt. You ask the citizens to tighten their belt, businesses to tighten their belt, pay more. But at the other side, whoever is there in terms of expenditure, they should also tighten their belt. I think it should be a collective responsibility between businesses and government, and then we'll be able to achieve a sound environment for businesses.
Convexly, someone would say that, well, if they are concerned about monetary policy rate, it's the same monetary policy rate from the actions of the Bank of Ghana that has moved inflation from 54 point, let's say 2 or 3% down to 41.2, 41.5% as we speak now. And so it's yielding results. The exchange rate has been stable also for a while. It is these same policies we are criticizing that has brought us to where we are, for which now businesses can have some space to be able to trade.
I think it's not solely because of the monetary policy, because from last year, consistently we had the policy rate going up. Consistently inflation was going up. Even in the IMF document, they have clearly stated the limited effectiveness of the monetary policy in controlling inflation, if you read the IMF document. Inflation is a number of factors. We can have cost push or demand pull. What we were experiencing was largely cost push because cost of production were going up. So it's not necessarily demand pull because there may be a part of it in it. Now, ask a typical Ghanaian whether they have enough money chasing fewer goods, and they will tell you no. Only Bank of Ghana knows that there are a lot of money because they supply. And we all know the financing of the fiscal deficit over 77 billion, so they know what they are doing. But I think that it should be a combination of factors. The reduction in inflation we are experiencing now is largely because you have had a pass-through effect of all the costs to a level, so now they are coming down. Also, food prices in terms of production of food had also gone up, so food prices are also coming up. So we realize that it's not solely because of the monetary policy, but the combination of factors. The monetary policy should complement the fiscal policy, or the two policies should complement each other. We are an economy where they are moving at different directions, and that is not good for the economy and businesses. Yes, we need some level of increment of the policy, but I think that it should be such a way that it should not be inimical to businesses. It shouldn't make cost of borrowing too high for businesses. And for the macroeconomic policies and variables, they are necessary conditions but not sufficient for us to move from where we are. You need them to be able to incentivize the private sector to pick up the environment and say that we are expanding, we are opening up new businesses, we are employing more people. But when that macroeconomic condition is there, but you have made it difficult for businesses to expand, you won't achieve the growth we want. That is what we are suffering from now. We are obsessed with achieving macroeconomic stability, but it should be a necessary condition for the businesses to expand. So you get up, you're a business person, you have an idea, and you want to borrow. You go to the bank, and you're able to get interest rate at 10 to 15%. Then you'll be able to also expand and employ more people. But the idea is there, and then you go and interest rate is 45%. Where are we going? And Ghana's interest rate is among the highest in the whole world. Among the highest. In our sub-region, Ghana's interest rate is the highest. How do we expect businesses to operate and be profitable? It wouldn't happen. So let's create the right environment, get a macroeconomic right, but also find a way to incentivize businesses to be able to expand, grow, and build a very resilient economy. Our economy is not resilient. That is why the little shock we find ourselves in difficulties. So I think that if you had expanded our economy, we have grow the manufacturing sector, we are now producing most of the things that we are importing. Then we wouldn't even need a lot of the city to go and import and put pressure on the city. That will cause depreciation. And the export that we would do will give us a lot of money. We did a simple research with our export to Burkina Faso and realized that within 5 years, if you are consistent, you will generate more than 3 billion that we are asking from IMF. Burkina Faso here.
Do you get the sense, the talk about the industrialization agenda, that push, that concept of one district, one factory, empowering the private businessman, it's right. Do you get the sense it's really a sincere talk by government when it comes to the industrialization drive?
Well, I think the concept, the idea is very good, but the implementation, I have a bit of challenge with that. If you want to industrialize, then all the factors that I've spoken about, in terms of interest rate, in terms of policy rate, in terms of taxes and all those things, they are not good for such kind of industrialization. Korea, we started, 1957 with them. When they were embarking on industrialization, there was a conscious effort of empowering the manufacturing sector. So they were supported with certain funds. You understand, certain tax incentives were provided. This is what we should do. And I also think that we can't have a wholesale industrialization saying that for every district we are going to set up an industry there. That district may be a provider of raw material and not necessarily having an industry there. So we should have zoned the industry based on their competitiveness. But, it's just omnibus industrialization. It won't work. There are certain sectors that we have competitive advantage that I was expecting that we focus our attention on now. I have said that if for every year, instead of saying that we are setting to 260 or so factories in every district, we are going to take 10 to 15 companies, depoliticize it, whatever they are, whether they are A or B, we look at their contribution to the economy and what they are bringing and say that we are going to support you. We are giving you the tax incentive. We are giving you a loan facility at a very minimal interest rate. The route to whatever you are, we are helping you. That company, very small as it may be, can grow to become a multinational. If you do that consistently for 10 years, if you use 10 out of them, you are going to have 100. If you use 50, you're going to have 150 multinationals. And that is how we develop the industrial sector. So I think that it's not too late, blunt idea, but let's look at the execution and how we can make it work as a country.
All right, we'll take a short breather. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation, and that will solely focus on the IMF, because they are supposed to be the saviors or the savior of the Ghanaian economy. 600 million is in the system. What does the business community expect for the government to do with these monies that are coming in? We'll be right back. And welcome back to Fact Sheet Live on ETV. And we're talking about the business community, their expectations, what they hope this whole IMF conversation would bring to the table. So for most of us, we are in a celebrant mood because the IMF money has landed. $600 million is in the Bank of Ghana's account. Are you excited as businessmen?
I think it's a good news, but I don't think we should jubilate. We should be excited.
Okay.
Because IMF facility is not for free. It comes with critical conditions that will affect us as individuals and also affect businesses. I sometimes wonder why for 17 times we have not learned lessons and we always go to IMF. Because the reasons why we go to IMF are always the same reasons. Debt sustainability issues. We are not managing our finances very well. So if you have been able to go there and get the facility, for me it's good news because we are going to have some level of stability in the economy. It's good news is because we are going to have some confidence and credibility in the economy. That is what we need as businesses to be able to thrive. But I don't think we should jubilate for first going to IMF and getting this facility. A lot of lessons must be learned from IMF and the things that we have gone through so that we don't go back to IMF again. In fact, there should be one of the key performance indicators that I always say from those who are managing our economy is that you should assure us that you are not taking us to IMF. You are going to manage your resources very well. Any government that has taken us to IMF, for me, I don't think that we should go there. But I also realized that at a point in time, it was the only way out for us because the economy has gotten to a level where internally we could not resuscitate it. And we need this financial support or bailout from IMF. That's why I said it's a good news for us. But I don't think that we should be having kinky party and jubilating, popping champagne and other things. We should rather have a sober reflection of our economic management and the way forward.
Well, we are told that our reserves now, we shouldn't be concerned as per the other news which has come that the last quarter of the year, our reserves would not be able to sustain us. Now we are told that it would suffice. We are told that it's going to go into budgetary support as well, which means that your members who are contractors, who are supposed to be embarking on certain key projects by the government, are going to get some money to either continue or to start new projects. And so the issue about the IMF being in the system and our managers of the economy's insatiable demand for projects that are beyond us. As businessmen, what do you say to them when you meet them? Because if a contract is going to be given for a road construction or for the building of a hospital facility, it's coming to you as a businessman to build that project. But as to the feasibility and the needfulness of that project, what do you tell government when you are going for these businesses?
So I think we should have our priorities right. As a country. In fact, most of them are for political expedience. That is why after every election, we have a huge budget deficit. After that, then we get back on track. And my fear is that next year, as an election year, with this IMF money, I don't know what is going to happen. IMF is good because it's going to help us with our balance of payment position. Prior to that, we were just about 3 weeks of import, which is very deadly. So with the 600 million coming, I think we've gone up. And some of them actually is also going to support the payment of some of these constructions and other things. What are the things that we need in this difficult moment? Some of the flagship programs, are they still relevant to us? Why don't we balance them to ensure that our revenue match up to our expenditure? That is a simple economics, that your revenue should be equal to your expenditure. Where you have your expenditure exceeding your revenue, that is where you have the challenge. So consistently, we've had our expenditure exceeding our revenue. And what we were doing is that we always go to the Eurobond market and we go and borrow at commercial rates and invest in social infrastructure. And that is what didn't help us. So when they closed that door to us, there was no way out. So once the money is in, we should prioritize, look at the areas that will help us, that will help the economy to grow, and also not bring a lot of stress to the citizens. So if you're investing in the health sector, which are the specific, do we need all the Agenda 111 now? Or we can spread it to the extent that our revenue will be able to support that. That, for me, that is where we need to look at. But largely, the IMF money is to help us solve our BOP challenges. IMF will not give you money to give to your business people. They don't do that. Even for infrastructure, it's difficult because it is a specific project that you can invest those monies in. So for me, as I said, it's good news because of the position that we found ourselves, and now at least we are able to stabilize our economy. We see the CD putting up a very strong performance, appreciating against the major trading current. That is good. That's what we need, and that is what IMF money does. Now is for the private sector to also take advantage of that. So we are importing raw materials to add value to it. your in dollar terms, the money that you'll be paying will be minimal and your cost of production will also go down. But you cannot achieve full effect when you have high taxes at the port. Over 22 taxes and levies at the port. For me, it's not good. And our trade policy as such that it's mainly for revenue generation instead of trade facilitation. That is where the impact on private sector will be negative. Make it affordable that when people import, at least they'll be able to pay the taxes and the levies. They add value to it and they export. That component of revenue getting from export should be our focus than the revenue from import.
For a nation that is import-driven, should we be having budget deficits in the first place? Because I always tell people that cut your coat according to your size. Should we be having budget deficits? Because for every budget we read, there's a deficit.
Yes. Because you have budget deficit largely because you are not producing enough. Largely because we are importing almost everything that we use in this country. And any economy of that nature will always have a budget deficit. So we need to now look in-house and look at how, as I've said earlier, we can empower the private sector, incentivize them to manufacture most of the things that we use in Ghana. And then export. So import substitution and also producing for export. Then we'll get the foreign revenue. Otherwise, we'll continue to have these challenges for a longer period of time. So the structure of our economy, we need to have a second look at it. And also, we are having deficit because the revenue we are generating from taxes is also low. There's this statement that our tax to GDP is low as compared to other countries, which presupposes that businesses are not paying taxes. That assertion is wrong. What they need to compare is the number of people who are supposed to pay taxes in those countries and they are paying, and the number of people and institutions are supposed to pay taxes in Ghana and they are paying. If you have only 5 million out of 15 million paying, then you won't get your tax revenue. Expand the tax net, get everybody to pay something small, then you can have your tax revenue. So until we increase the tax revenue through compliance and effective collection, we are going to have this challenge. The recent activity by GRA through the EVAT, you know the amount of revenue we generated. We need to digitize these processes so that it will be so easy for you sitting wherever you are to say, I'm paying my taxes. I can calculate my tax payable and then I will pay. So a lot of things will have to go into that. The tax rate for me is okay for every business. If you take a typical business, for instance, the corporate tax alone is 25%. The 3 taxes that they introduce, the growth and sustainability levy is 5% of gross profit, which is not allowable for you to deduct as an expense. Directly it becomes a tax. If you are also within the excise tax, you are paying 20% of that. And then there are a number of fees and levies from all these government institutions. Now it's serving as IGF for them. That's what they use. But they don't add up to our tax revenue. So a typical business will be paying all these things, but they only look at the other taxes and say that you are not paying anything. Typically, people are paying 45 to 50% of taxes and levies. So nobody can say that businesses are not paying taxes. We should have a bigger conversation on this, and then I think it will help us as a country.
Now, we can't have this conversation without looking at the financiers of your ideas and your businesses. The solvency of most of these financial institutions, because it also became a matter of concern for us. And so you are the businessmen who interface with them. What do your financiers tell you, your bankers? Do they have the capacity for you?
Now is very difficult. Through the domestic debt exchange, the DDEP, we have weakened the banking sector. And the banking sector is the foundation of our financial system. Most of the banks, and I think it's a lesson for all of us. I mean, during our basic economics, we say government is risk free. So you give money to the government. When you need it, the government gets it for you. Now it's not like that. So we need to revise our economics. all of them decided to put a lot of money into government bonds instead of investing in the private sector, in the productive sector. And now through the DDEP, most of them have lost their funding, or they have to take much longer time for them to get it. A recent announcement indicated that 2022, banks in Ghana posted 8 billion losses.
Yeah.
These are assets of these banks. The banks can only give you money when they have it. So their balance sheet have all been impaired because of this. So the money in itself is not there. So two troubles: a business person who is even ready to pay for the high interest rate because of a project he has will go to the bank, and because the balance sheet of these banks are impaired, they say we don't have enough money for you. So much as they would want to support, these are the challenges we have. But I think I also will blame the government appetite for borrowing. Every time government is borrowing, there should be a balance of that. The amount government can borrow and the amount that can go to businesses. When government continuously borrow, you crowd out the private sector. And because a typical bank will think that a private sector business is risky, they will prefer to give it to government in terms of bonds and treasury, and then go and sleep. Within a year, you can sleep and you can still make your profit. And for me, that is the laziest way or the easy way of making profit. But we do that at the expense of growing our economy, building a resilient economy for all of us. So businesses need money because they are not getting it. They can't expand and people cannot be employed. And if you look at the IMF, even before that, the 2023 budget, government said that it's not going to employ. There is a freeze on employment. The only hope for those who are completely investing and those who are seeking employment is the private sector. Largely, the private sector employed 96% of the total working force. The government just employed just about 6% or so, even though it's the largest single employer. So anytime the private sector is affected, it affects every sphere of our economy. We need to now also be counting the social impact of unemployment. And that, for me, will help us to understand the reason why we are saying that build the private sector, incentivize the private sector, give them the necessary resources. Because the private sector is the engine of growth. If you check our GDP computation, close to 80 to 90% is from the private sector. So why won't you support the private sector? In economies where they are working on macroeconomic issues, they have walked the path of the micro. And the micro is the factory, is the industries, is the people who are producing. When you strengthen them and they are producing, you get most of your macro issues resolved. If you are not importing and we have all the goods here, we will not spend a lot of dollars for which the cedi will depreciate. Inflation will come down because we have a lot of goods in the economy. So we can only solve our macro issues not with excess taxation, but with helping the micro, which is those who are producing in the private sector.
But interestingly, if you follow over the years the Bank of Ghana's approach to the resolution of our problems, which has been the cycle of going to the IMF, your approach of coming from the micro, the development of the micro, to rather reflect in the macro, is not what they use.
Yeah.
Rather, they use the macro, which in the end does not even correlate with the micro. Because if, for instance, now we are being told that the inflation is around 41 point something, if you go to the market now to go and buy, which is at the micro level, it's more than that 41% that they are talking about. And so there isn't really any much correlation between the macro and the micro, which is supposed to be in sync.
Yes. That's what we should begin to, that is where the discourse, the conversation is supposed to be for now. And as a chamber, we are taking it upon ourselves to bring this to the line, let people understand the need for us to develop the micro. There's a program that we call the Chamber Dialogue, National Dialogue.
Okay.
We are using that one to sensitize the people, to provide information about some of these difficulties, to let people know that we need to also look at the micro as well. The next one we are doing will be how to use micro economics to solve macro issues. But if you take the Central Bank of Ghana, it has only one mandate, to bring inflation down. and that is using all the policies, the open market policies and other things. What we have to do is that the fiscal policy is complementing what they are doing. If you have them using monetary policy to bring down, and the fiscal policy is also working somewhere, running somewhere with taxes, with levies and other things, you can't bring inflation down. So let's look at how we can work together, complement each other, and also now be discussing the micro and the macro and how they interface. If you have the macro and the micro is weak, as I said, it's a necessary condition, not sufficient for economic growth. That's what we are fighting for now. But if you get it and the macro is weak, the businesses are weak, you can't get a resilient economy.
Would we see the resuscitation of businesses within, let's say, the next 6 to 1 year? I ask this question on the back of the approach we are using, because here is the case. Government just recently was telling the banks to reduce their interest. Meanwhile, monetary policy rate is still where it is.
Exactly.
And so I'm wondering how that is going to be possible for the banks to achieve that. Taxes are high. Traffic at the ports have reduced per a letter we cited from the Ghana Ports and Harbours Authority to you, the businessmen, to come for a roundtable discussion.
Sure.
Petroleum products, we don't have control over it. And so I ask, how are we really going to get ourselves out of this, seeing that one end gets tightened and the other end gets loosened?
And that is the difficult aspect of our economic management. Every economic decision will have a negative impact. It's about how you mitigate that negative impact, and that will determine the sources of that economic decision. The things that the IMF is asking us to do is the things that we were supposed to have done. Cut your coat according to the size of your cloth. Look at your revenue before you spend. We have a higher expenditure than our revenue. So what the IMF is doing, these are things that we know that we should have done, but we didn't do. They are helping us now to do them. The challenge is when they leave and how we manage the economy. That will send us back to IMF. So if we consistently do what they are asking us to do, the likelihood that inflation will come down is there. The likelihood that when inflation comes down, you can't keep taxes at that level is also there. In fact, when the MPP came, for me, one of the happiest moments was that they identified what we call nuisance taxes. And they said that these taxes are not helping businesses. We are going to take them off. And they took about 17 different taxes. That for us, it was of much joy to us. Now they have come in several forms, and even in a worse form, impacting negatively on businesses. Where did we get it wrong? The taxes that you said they are nuisance, now you are bringing them in another form. For instance, if you take the growth and sustainability levy, for instance, it started in 2000 as a national reconstruction levy. That levy is supposed to be maximum of 5 years. We kept it and we changed the name to the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy. Now we have rebranded it, you are calling it the Growth and Sustainability Levy. So we have now perpetuated the levy that is supposed to be for a short period. And who is paying? It's the business. What do we do with the revenue that we get? During COVID alone, look at the amount of money we got. Close to $2.something billion.
Yeah.
We should be able to show evidence of that. So we are getting the revenue. The way we use it is also questionable, and we have to have a second look at that. So I strongly believe that the economy will be back on track. In fact, once IMF are in, the investors who are sitting on the fence, and of course, during that period, we get investors calling you, when are you getting the IMF facility? You think the economy will be back? We are waiting for, and then we will come back. So those who were sitting on the fence, they will be coming back because there is confidence, there is credibility. And that is where we will get resources as businesses to grow the economy. So for me, I think it was a necessary evil. We have gotten it. We need to make it work and then ensure that we use the money judiciously for the intended purposes. I have managed 600 million The subsequent ones will not come because you have signed. It will come because you've met the conditions that they have set for you. So once you're able to meet all these conditions, these are the conditions that will help us structure our economy. Part of it is for us to, there are reforms that will help us structure our economy, work on corruption, work on expenditure and all those things, getting value for what the things that we are spending money for. And I think that was what was going to help us.
Well, we are ending the conversation on the note of the engagement between the IMF team and the Ghanaian officials and then the media. And if you go through their document properly, you realize that there's over-concentration on revenue mobilization and not capital rationalization. And so a colleague journalist asked a question as to whether the IMF is interested in government rationalizing its expenditure. I mean, locally, we've spoken about government size.
Yes.
Locally, we've spoken about government expenditure in terms of officials and even fuel they use. We don't know how much has been saved from that, as we were told some 30% was going to be taken off. But we don't know much about that. Ending our conversation, if IMF officials are listening and they are watching us this evening, what would you say to them in terms of this expenditure rationalization problem, which they didn't highlight a lot on?
Yeah, I think there should be a fair balance. I think almost every Ghanaian have had concern about government expenditure. And if you listen to the conversation, everybody mentioned that it's very high. The number of ministers, the cars. There was an example that you can only use V8 when you are going outside Accra. Who monitors that?
Yeah.
They all fit into our expenditure. Is it possible? That was what I was saying, that it was heavy on revenue mobilization than expenditure rationalization. So if possible, they have to take a second look at it. They should hold everybody accountable. Every cedi that we are spending should give us value for money. Otherwise, it's not necessary. Otherwise, we'll go back because expenditure will far outweigh our revenue. And if you look at even the 2023 budget, I said that it's still tilted towards revenue mobilization, all the taxes and other things. And all the 7 points they raise, I always say that there is a contradiction. If you are saying that you want to boost or help the businesses to grow, meanwhile, you are doing aggressive taxation. And who are those paying the taxes? Businesses cannot survive when you are increasing taxes left, right, center. So for me, I don't know how far we have gone, but I don't think it's fair looking at that aspect of expenditure rationalization and revenue mobilization. I think there's no fairness in it. So we're all wondering the kind of negotiation that went on with this IMF deal. Who were those involved and what was the focus on? And I think the document is answering the question. As to how we agreed to some of them, for me, it's still worry
That's you. Just a quick one, under a minute. The former President, John Dramani Mahama, has given some assurance to some of the operators of some of these banks that collapsed, that when he becomes president, they will take a look at some of these banks who had their licenses revoked and see if they can restore them. One, is it a positive thing to do? And is it feasible?
I have always supported having a locally owned banks. So when this issue happened and some of the banks suffered and their licenses were withdrawn, I was much disturbed. But a number of things also went on. I think we need to have a fair discussion and look at the number, look at the reasons. If there are some illegalities, we cannot give the license to the person if he has done something untoward, illegal issues. But if for any other reason, any political reason, someone has lost the license, or I think we can have a second look at it. But it's too complicated. It's not easy like that. So for me, it sounds a bit political.
Okay.
But we have to look at the business and economic aspect of it. The ones that we think genuinely they need it, we can give them their license back. I think we can do that. But we don't have to do it because of political reasons. That's the challenge and difficulty we have had. A lot of these campaign messages, campaign promises, sometimes inimical to activities and businesses. So I'm not totally against it, but I think that we need to look at the facts on the ground and look at the ones that merit giving them back their licenses. And beyond that, we should be able to grow local banks. If you look at the banking space now, almost all the banks are foreign-owned banks. When they make profits, they convert the profit into dollars from cedis, because we trade here in cedis, into dollars. And then they send it to their shareholder. That is fair, because our investment law says that you can repatriate 100% of your profit. Yeah. So they convert it and your CD will depreciate. But if they are locally banks, they make profit. The profit is in CD. It stays here. They can invest in other sectors as well. So let's look at how it goes. But it shouldn't be a political talk. Let's look at the facts on the ground.
Interesting, Mr. Waje. Well, thank you for hosting us today and
Thanks
for these beautiful inputs that you have made into the conversation. We're hoping that the powers that be would heed some of the advice that you've given us. But we are so grateful for the opportunity. And that's Mr. Mark Bedu Abaji. He's the Chief Executive Officer for the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, sharing some thoughts with us on the economy generally and then the IMF in the equation. We're grateful that you join us tonight on Fact Sheet. We wish you a pleasant evening. Good night.